Hello sim racers, today we're going to be taking a look at the latest release in the Formula 1 franchise, F1 2021, formerly Codemasters, picked up by EA most recently.
Check out simrace247.com for your latest in sim racing news, reviews and leagues.
So, the biggest question that most of us have every single year when it comes down to a new release of a continuing series is it worth getting this year's edition? And in this particular instance, we're going to take a look and see what we think as to the overall package and what's presented, how different it is somewhat from last year. We'll touch upon that, and hopefully the overview will be good for newer players as well, because we do have to accept as F1 fans that there are a lot of new people coming to the sport as fans and observers, and so there may be brand new people trying to buy into the franchise this year, so hopefully we can give a decent overview for them also. F1 2021 does not get everything right by any stretch of the imagination, but boy oh boy is it exciting. To jump behind the wheel of Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes or Max Verstappen's Red Bull or even Charlie L's Ferrari, the level of excitement is just totally incredible. F1 2021 does a great job in pulling you into the atmosphere, showing you some of that razzle dazzle and that high power, and also giving you a taste of what it's like to be an F1 driver in the heat of battle. My Team mode takes this a step further by putting you in the shoes of a team boss, having to make the decisions on how to keep your team afloat and competitive in the cutthroat world of F1. Due to the way that F1 2021 is set up, you can experience this as short arcade experiences with small things like 5-lap races, or you could take this up through varying stages all the way up to full-length Grand Prix where you can test your mettle against the other drivers. The addition of weekly events brings additional variety to your objectives, allowing you to participate in random scenarios, dropping you in as various drivers at various points in different races throughout a calendar that come up on a weekly basis. There's also the opportunity to compete in these weekly events in a sort of multiplayer online type scenario, which sometimes includes AI, with the ability to set things such as no damage all the way up to simulation damage, no tire wear all the way up to simulation. All of these varying degrees allow for customization for each player to be able to tackle the challenges of F1 at a level that suits them. On a side note, the damage model this year is actually very interesting as they've made some updates to it, allowing for things like rear wing damage and floor damage to the car, which seem to repeatedly happen to me over a period of time and is something that I guess may be tweaked eventually. So one of the hardest things about writing this review is accepting the fact that most of the changes in the F1 2021 release are mostly incremental changes, barring a few new really cool features and the addition of this storyline mode Breaking Point. But aside from that, it's slightly tweaked graphics, it's handling models tweaked to the current regulations, it's the current liveries, current driver list, etc. What do you get with Formula 1 2021? As with each year's release, there's a number of modes ranging from solo, multiplayer, and in this year's edition, there is split screen and local area play, which makes a return. The organization of the menus is slightly different from previous years to accommodate for the new options. So, the new career mode which has been added allows for single player career or 2-player career, which allows for you to play with a friend online, going through playing as teammates on the same team, or you can play as a separate team. In the single player career, you can do My Team, which would allow for you to be the team boss as well as the team driver, or you can actually choose to replace another driver on the current circuit. Solo mode offers you the new Breaking Point story-driven mode, following the story of a young, often breathless and exaggerated Agent Jackson through his career from F2 into the beginnings of F1. There's also Grand Prix mode, which allows for you to set either single or a series of Grand Prix races across a number of tracks. And of course, there's the good old time trial mode where you can go and set times with various cars on different circuits from across the calendar. Multiplayer is back again this year, containing your usual ranked and unranked play, unranked being described more as social play this year, and also being broken down into categories for beginner to more experienced players. to help to navigate what would be best for you online. There is again the split screen mode, you can make local area games, and there are also weekly events and the ability to join and create your own league to set up your own race calendars online. It's important to note that at the time of this review, I have incredibly limited amounts of time on the multiplayer side of things. So when it comes down to potential online bugs, etc., I do not have very much experience of any of that, and I'm really unable to comment on that here at this time. Customization makes a huge return again this year, allowing for drivers to be able to customize their liveries for their vehicles, to customize individual items such as helmets, gloves, and driving suits. There's also the return of hoses and various emotes that the avatar can make, which you get to select and customize specifically for your driver. The reward system, which is the podium pass, makes a return again this year, allowing for players to either use the free podium pass or to purchase one with the special F1 coins, for which you can unlock even more liveries and gloves, helmets, suits, emotes, poses, even badges, etc. The return of weekly challenges also allow for you to quickly get XP, which contributes to the unlocks on your podium pass, unlocking more goodies. It should also be mentioned here that aside from having the full access to the F1 2021 car roster with updated liveries and drivers, there's also access to the full season of F2 from the 2020 season, allowing you to have short or full season driving F2 cars. Let's get into the core of things. So for myself personally, the things that I care about the most are: what does the cars feel like to drive? Does everything look nice? Am I enjoying the experience? Is this fun? And is it somewhat representative of the real sport? For me, I can check all of those boxes and say that I'm very happy and comfortable to answer in all of those departments, that this is definitely an upgrade from the previous years in terms of that. However, the jump in F1 2021 to F1 2020 is not as big a jump as it was from going from F1 2019 to 2020. It's nice to see that they've managed to update the way how the cars respond. As per the current rule set, downforce to the rear of the car has been removed, and these cars currently provide that level of sort of twitchiness in the corner, which you have to become used to over a period of time. So it seems that the developers have continued to follow not only driver advice, but also stuck with the rule set to replicate cars that somewhat feel like that. In terms of driving feel also, I tend to find this year that it has just as much contact as it did last year, and nothing's reduced in that department. However, what I would say is that I've noticed probably a bit more grit and a little bit more detail this year. That may be down to the fact that my wheel settings are somewhat different from last year, so that could account for some of the difference, but it does feel like there is more detail and there is a little bit more going on with the wheel. Speaking of wheels, however, as a Thrustmaster wheel owner, I did initially encounter some problems with some bugs which completely broke the force feedback initially, making my first sort of few days using this a bit of a pain, trying to find workarounds online, etc. So I do think that that's been fixed for the moment, and hopefully none of you are experiencing any of those issues. Speaking of control options, I use a wheel, but you can also use a controller with force feedback, or you could use the keyboard on PC. Unfortunately, unlike many other games and sims, mouse support has not been included for PC users. And seems we're talking of things that aren't here right now, I should also probably mention the fact that there is no VR support either. It has to be noted that in accordance with the rules, the cars are actually, to me, feel a little bit slower this year. And it's also important to note that this year the changing of engine modes has been banned. So where with previous editions you would be able to change your fuel mix to have a rich fuel mix or a lean fuel mix or a standard fuel mix, you don't have that adjustment, and that actually makes for some very interesting play and strategy on the circuit, because there's no option to increase your power or decrease it. You're given that same power the whole time, with the exception of your overtake button, which has made a return again this year. For a single player event, obviously you're going to be racing against the AI, and there's a few things that I have to say in regards to that. First and foremost, this is probably the toughest, I'm not sure if it will be tweaked, but toughest level of AI that I've come across in an F1 game in this franchise so far. I've actually found myself turning the AI level down quite considerably on what I would be using previously due to how fast and how difficult they are to race against. Just my opinion, but they seem tough this year. Not only that, they actually seem to be quite a bit smarter. There was a few times when I met Alonso on circuit and he was like the real guy. He was just very quick and very smart and pulled some very different moves that I was not used to seeing in an F1 game. Max is very aggressive in the way that he drives. Even people like Sonoda, he's just incredibly quick. It just seemed very difficult for me to keep up with these guys, unlike previous editions. Moving on to looks for just a moment, F1 2021 maintains that decent level of graphical representation of the cars and the environment. It has great dry and rain effects depending on the time of day that you're driving at. So all of these things are incorporated very nicely, lots of detail, everything seems to be as it should. Using my 2070 Super, I was able to get constant frame rates over 100 FPS. Aside from looking nice, the game actually also sounds pretty nice as well. When you're driving, you can hear everything to do with the way how the engine is revving up. You can hear the whine from the turbo, just everything to do with the car. And obviously you can make adjustments in the audio settings to increase certain effects. Very representative, and I really do enjoy that aspect of it. The sound is definitely great, and all of the official sounds are used. For example, lights out at the beginning, things like that just add to the excitement of the whole experience. Plus the commentary. Some people get annoyed at Andy Croft, but I really kind of find him a bit cheesy but also funny, and Anthony Davidson also does some commentary on this. They both do a great job, and it really does help to make it feel like a TV broadcast that you are sort of participating in whilst also watching. So all of these things add to the experience. So at 12 minutes, I'm thinking it's about time to wrap this up and just conclude for you guys. So I mean, just to recap, in writing this review, it was inescapable to notice things like the amount of similarities and copy and paste from previous F1 titles. Lewis Hamilton's hair is still wrong, the podium celebrations at the end still have the same setup as they normally do, the celebrations from the team bosses at the end are exactly the same. In fact, even though we just went through a pandemic, nobody's wearing a mask at all in any of the scenes according to my memory. So there's a lot of things that just get carried over. There are also 3 circuits that are going to be added to the calendar this year that are not currently in game but apparently will be added with a later update. So even in terms of circuits, there's a lot of recycling that goes on there. Obviously last year they removed the bump from Suzuka. For those of us who are familiar with the F1 Suzuka bump, that was removed. I'll have to check and see if that's still removed this year, but the updates are not that great in terms of like how they deal with the tracks, but they seem to be focusing more on sort of the cars, deliveries, and somewhat of the experience, and it maintains the ability to continue doing that. It must also be said that with Codemasters going over to EA, I was a little bit scared that EA might not necessarily handle this in the best possible way, but so far no real complaints. They've actually produced something that's on par with what normally happens. Classic cars have been removed. They give it, they take it away a little bit, but in general, is it worth getting this year's franchise if you're the type of person who likes to keep up to date with it? I'd say go ahead. For me, I'll be buying this year's one and probably next year's one unless I heard ahead of time that it was absolutely terrible. If you're the type of person who needs to see a lot of change before you're excited to buy the new one, this might not necessarily be your cup of tea. If you're a newcomer, I encourage you to jump right in if this is the type of thing that you're interested in. This will give you a great start in the F1 franchise. So I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Take care and look out for more F1 2021 content on Challenger Sim Racing, sponsored by simrace247.com.